This is Coda Radio, episode 141 for February 16th, 2015. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this year's show goes on. My name is Chris, and we have something special for you today. Join me, Mr. Dominic will be coming on later in more of a flashback form. We wanted to do a retro look back for Coda Radio. We have some special stuff going on this week, and Mr. Dominic is out. So we're going to take this opportunity to look back. A lot of Xamarin discussions are going to be in here. Some other things that are topics we actually wanted to try to address in our best of episode, but didn't have room and felt like needed to be revisited. And one topic that seems to be continually revisited is my decision to learn Ruby. And I have to be a little honest with you. As we started here, I'm with the chat room, and they asked, where am I at in the training? I'm gonna be straight with you guys. I'm kind of at the same spot I've ended up every single time I decide to do this. I kind of get paralyzed by indecision. I continue to get great feedback, like this one that came in from Jan1024188, rolls right off the tongue, from the Coda Radio subreddit. He says, why Chris should learn Python instead of Ruby? And I got to be honest, every time somebody makes a really compelling Python argument, it resonates with me. I'm not blind to the fact that Python is a great option for somebody who's primarily on the Linux platform like myself. And that there's some really amazing projects that are in Python, and some really big, some really ambitious things like OpenShot, written in Python. And so obviously you could handle the whole range of anything I'd ever want to do. So he writes, sometimes you have to make a compromise and pick a better tool for the job. And I'm a practical person. I mean, we take a pragmatic look here on this show. And he says, I used to do Rails development, so I really wanted to write some video and automation in Ruby. But it turned out the libraries were just bad or unavailable. So I turned to Python. It's much better luck there, as Python is more of a general-purpose language. Ruby is mostly used by Rail hipsters. The main library I used is called MoviePy. It might be useful for Chris as well. Have fun, and by the way, I think Python is a pragmatic language and a better pick if you're in more than one-person team. And of course, this then generates a whole thread of discussions around picking the best tool for the job. And one of the reasons I went Ruby here was because we use some Ruby already in-house. And Rob Loach jumps in, longtime listener of the show, Rob Loach, on the Rails by hipsters comment. Ruby's mostly used by Rails, with hipsters using Rails. Rob says, I agree. My experience with Ruby has been the following. Dependency hell and version conflicts between independent libraries, slow processing, and fanboys making religious choices of Mac OS X and Ruby. I kind of feel like that's beginning to change, though, Rob. I think Linux is starting to become a serious first-class citizen there. He says, I do have a few projects that use Ruby, but I've slowly transitioned to faster, more effective solutions that fit the job better. Oh, okay. Whatever gets the job done has great community and makes it easy to share. Python, Node, Go, PHP, I've had great experiences with all communities. As long as it works for you and you find it easy to contribute and get involved in the community, you'll thrive. Those are all, you can see though, like this is surprisingly hard for me, and I know I get all wrapped up in this. It's not like I'm making a big life decision. But my time is extremely valuable to me, and I don't know if I will spend a lot of time in the next little while ever learning a different one. So I do want to make sure I make the right time investment when I make my choice. And it's a difficult thing. And this is something that I don't think I'm going to solve in the next week or so, so hopefully you'll bear with me. But I think I'm narrowing in on a choice. And part of me, honestly, is going to be motivated by what solutions I have available to me. And I think that's kind of the key piece. And our first solution, of course, and one of the reasons that I know I can eventually do this is Linux Academy. That's our first sponsor of the Coda Radio program, Linux Academy. Head over to linuxacademy.com/coders. That'll get you our special Coda Radio discount. Linux Academy is a great resource. It's built by people that are super passionate about Linux, about the technologies around Linux, like Python, like Ruby, but also the entire stack that you end up having to deploy as a person that works in production. The AWS web environment, of course, OpenStack, anything in the DevOps realm. If you find yourself transitioning into that, maybe you didn't even realize you were there, and one day you woke up and said, holy crap, I'm one of those DevOps people. It doesn't matter. Linux Academy has got your back. And if you go to linuxacademy.com/coders and you get our discount, then you'll get value on your subscription. And that the great thing is that already is so much great content in there with self-paced courses, step-by-step video courses, downloadable comprehensive study guides you can bring offline. You can choose from 7+ Linux distributions. They'll automatically adjust the courseware to match that distribution, right? So they're going to match the distribution, and not only does the courseware match the distribution, but the virtual machines that they spin up in the labs for you also match. It's so cool. It's so slick. It's because these guys get it. This is what they do. This is their focus. The reason why you listen to Jupiter Broadcasting content is because we go deeper than a lot of other podcasts go, because we live this stuff. This is us. Same with Linux Academy. And that's why I think they're a great fit for the Jupiter Broadcasting audience. Go over there and try out some of their Docker stuff. Or if you've been thinking about Ruby like I have, they've got new courseware on Ruby on Linux right there. You can go check out all of it over at linuxacademy.com/coders. Go try them. You can do the learning plan too. I was talking about time is exceedingly valuable. One of the things I really like about Linux Academy is they get that, and they do not ever undervalue your time. And in fact, they give you tools specifically to allow you to take advantage of limited time, or to let you go full pedal to the metal when you have enough time. And so for me, I take advantage of the learning plans. As soon as they rolled those things out, it's really useful. You go in there, you say how much time you have available on each day of the week. It could be none, or it could be an hour or two for Monday, an hour or two Tuesday, 30 minutes Wednesday, right? You kind of line out the system, and then the system will populate those days with content that fits your time availability. It'll generate reminders for you because they assume you're probably pretty busy, and they can remind you about quizzes to get studying done. And when you jump in, you're going to get a complete snapshot of right where you're at on any of the courseware. They have Android development, PHP development, Python. I mean, this is where I'm going, right? Whether I go Ruby or Python, this is where I'm going. And I think you can too for a lot of things. linuxacademy.com/coders. Go get our special discount. And a big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. All right, chat room. Brace yourselves, because we are about to go in the Coder Radio retro machine and take a look back at some of our more popular topics. So we should probably mention next Monday, doing a double Coder Radio, 2 back-to-back Coder Radios. So that'll be 97 and 98 back-to-back. And Mr. Dominic, why are we doing that?
Well, I'm getting married in 2 weeks.
Get the hell out of here.
What?
It's true.
It's actually happening. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Finally turning you into an honest man, huh? Wow.
I know. I thought it would never happen for me.
Well, we'll see. I say the jury's still out.
All right, Mike. So I almost feel like we've been accidentally building to this topic over like the last 3 weeks. So we talked maybe even the last 4 weeks, because first we talked about Material and what Google's trying to do with design, and how Material's sort of their attempt to kind of make Android have a unified look that works in multiple different form factors. Then we talked about building interfaces and the tools that are available for that and how much they suck. And then you had a blog post, or at least, I don't know if you wrote it, but, it was on your blog over at dominicm.com. You wrote up a review of the Xamarin. Is it the entire suite, or are you just looking at the forms aspect in this review?
So this review is actually just looking at vanilla Xamarin. So this gets a little weird.
Lay it on me.
Xamarin has 2 very different offerings. One is what in the past was just called Xamarin, which is basically this is a gross oversimplification, right? But basically a C# wrapper around native iOS and native Android APIs. And that one, we were talking about the user interface tools before. That one actually uses the storyboard files out of iOS and uses the same Android layout files. Very much just say, do you know C#? Do you want to do mobile? Let's do it, right? Some limited code sharing, but not a ton using classic Xamarin. Then there's this new offering called Xamarin Forms, which is totally different.
Okay.
This review is only of Xamarin, and the reason for that is Xamarin Forms is incredibly new.
Okay. That makes sense.
And I am doing some work with it, but, I mean, just kind of a full disclosure thing. It's so new that when you're working with it, you're talking to the developers working on it, kind of thing.
Okay.
And they're saying there's things that they haven't finished yet, there's stuff like that. Xamarin Forms is certainly not something you're going to want to ship in your enterprise unless it's like a Skunkworks project just yet.
Well, I'm kind of, in a way, I feel like maybe this is an opportunity. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it, because I think being just fully honest with you is I hold multi-level biases towards Xamarin. Right. And I think kind of some of that comes from like Real Basic, where I've seen like, yes, we can create something that's not from the native SDK and IDE, and we'll build it out into a binary that you can drop on that platform. It'll be just like you made it in Xcode, just like that, only not quite. And then you go to actually use it, and it's crap. So I've got like this bias towards these. Build it in the, this completely foreign language, so in this case maybe, and I could be completely misunderstanding, but you write something in C#, but the target platform, they expect you on that platform to use, the target language is Objective-C. So you're not it's almost like you're sneaky. You're getting away with something a little bit. You're sneaking it past the cops and submitting this app that you made with the outlaw development environment. I'm kind of exaggerating the bias, but
yeah,
that's what I conjure up when I think of Xamarin.
I mean, I am right on the hater train with you, and software written in Real Basic, software written in even some of the old Java GUI kits were terrible, right?
Yeah.
One might argue that Java FX is also terrible.
Oh,
but so the road to Xamarin. I mean, we've been doing Xamarin for actually several months now. And the road to Xamarin was kind of, Chris, do you remember dating in high school?
yeah,
It started with a little bit of a look in a hallway,
yeah.
maybe a quick chat at a locker. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
here.
dialed in that the band geeks were definitely the low-hanging fruit for a computer nerd. What? No, I mean, but band girls need love too, man. It's not a disservice. I was answering a market need. What? Come on.
The true capitalist. Anyway, my point is this has been something of a long flirtation.
Yeah.
And it's why, some of the folks writing in, I won't say complaining, but I will say bitching, that we haven't covered any new technical tools was because I wasn't sure that I wanted to just discuss Xamarin, because I know sometimes people take everything I discuss as like a super endorsement and kind of get pissed off when it doesn't work out for them. So I kind of played it cool, right?
You wanted to kind of...
Well, I wanted to be sure I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Xamarin is a tool that solves a problem. Now, the problem we've been having is we get lots of people who call and say, hey, Fingertip, we want an app, we want it on both platforms. We really don't have the budget, right? Now, we flirted with various HTML5 solutions. We've done projects, we've shipped successful projects in various HTML5 solutions. But there's just something about the HTML5 solutions that never really satisfied me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one that you've probably heard of the most is PhoneGap, and PhoneGap is not something we recommend. It's just not good, right? When you're doing a PhoneGap project, you're shooting for almost okay. Like, that's the top you're going to get. Titanium is better. The folks over at Telerik have something that's pretty interesting. But again, when we tried it out, it was very immature. So I've always, so we have a market problem of people want dual platform apps, right? And I'm using the phrase dual platform rather than cross intentionally.
So by dual, do you mean iOS and Android? So not like iOS and web or Android and web?
No.
That's a little depressing, but okay.
Well, to be fair, though, right, your mileage may vary. I mean, Fingertip Tech has a reputation for mobile solutions.
True, right, right. Yeah.
We haven't done, we've done a lot of web work, but a lot of it's of that silent subcontracting kind of crap where we can't show it. So.
Right, no, that makes sense. You're known, you kind of got a reputation for that particular area, so that's...
In fact, I can't tell you how many times another vendors ended up doing the web application just because our customer didn't know we did it.
Right, yeah, yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a level of self-selectingness to this, where if you're in a general interactive agency or web development company, Xamarin probably doesn't make a lot of sense for you, right? I mean, if you're a pure HTML5 shop, Xamarin is probably not the way to go.
Sure.
So anyway, we have this problem where we have, we've also been getting a lot more, let's say, line of business type work rather than consumer. Or maybe it's consumer, but it's consumer for one specific industry, right? It's like prosumer kind of stuff.
Okay.
Where you're not so worried about gradients of wood, which thank God Apple killed in iOS 7. And you're not really shooting for the TechCrunch reading crowd, right?
Right.
You're shooting more for, we're in this trade and all my guys need to carry this and do their job.
It needs to be functional,
It needs to be on both platforms.
Yeah.
And this is my budget.
Okay.
So double native is incredibly expensive, right? And there's this, in my mind, this fallacy of, oh, well, the development cost in double native is expensive. It is. But if you're doing two totally native code bases separate, the big cost is going to be that maintenance cost, right? You have to maintain both platforms totally independently of each other. So we got into a way of, we have this certain class of customer. Now we still offer native development. We still have a lot of customers who take us up on native development. But we have this certain group of customers, for very good business reasons, right? Because of what they're doing, need a dual platform, somewhat more cost-sensitive solution. That's where Xamarin kind of comes in.
And I would imagine, too, oftentimes this is probably something that ties into maybe something that's a specific application that's unique to their industry, or something that's semi-common, like a Salesforce backend or something like that.
We're not cloning Instagram and Xamarin.
Right. It's right? Stuff that, like, there's some database stuff you're going to have to be able to do, right? That kind of thing.
Whatever. A lot of it's like interacting with their internal service.
Yeah. Yeah, their backend, you've got to be able to search something and pull up a result from their database.
It's more B2B. I feign to use the word enterprise because these companies aren't, enterprise big, but
okay, yeah,
it's more business prosumer than consumer. These apps we're doing. Again, not all of them. We still do consumer apps. This is just a growing segment of.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I could honestly see pretty easily. Like a lot of this stuff, it's interesting. A lot of our equipment now has an API in a way. So like our mixer and the lights and a few other things can all be controlled. Like they all have APIs available to them, and we could have like a Jupiter Broadcasting automation app that talks to this stuff. And I would maybe in theory be able to have like modes you go into, last mode, Coda Radio mode, and it would then send a universal remote. It would probably work just as well too.
Right.
But and we're not some big enterprise, but that as these technologies kind of just become more common, I could see us wanting to do something like that.
Right. And from a cost perspective, some of these companies are actually allowing people to bring their own device rather than purchase, let's say, 200 iPads because it's cheaper, right? You don't have to buy the device. Yeah. The problem is you have to then potentially support Android as well, or vice versa, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of enterprises, at least of the size we're dealing with, are buying cheap Android devices rather than iPads, purely out of a cost-cutting perspective. So I'm going to get into some of the more technical stuff on Xamarin in a minute. I just kind of want to go over the case for it. But there is some code sharing. There is some nice little tricks you can do. So the other argument, the other business case we've been able to make for it is, hey, 200-person company, you're not huge, but you have like a 4-person IT department, right? Guess what technology your IT department probably already is familiar with?
.NET.
Right. C#.NET.
Yeah. Again,
theoretical overall cost of ownership is significantly lower in that case, right?
Well, because, even if it's sort of, I could see that making such a difference if they're just, that's the name of something they've heard of before. Like, even just that makes a difference. Oh, C#? Yeah, we know what that is.
Right. I mean, in the earlier Coda Radios, I recounted the stories of convincing IT managers that, using an Apple device wasn't going to bomb their Exchange network, right?
Yeah.
So there's certainly a let's say, brand recognition quality to C#.
Yeah.
And now we're not going to talk about this today too, but C# is actually a phenomenal language. Just gonna let that one slide for now.
Proprietary software is not ethical.
It's actually open source now.
Then your description is not accurate.
Wow.
What happens to you is not sufficiently important to justify the wrong you're doing.
Yes, it is. I'm evil.
What's wrong with that?
Exactly.
This is egregious.
All right, I'm all done. That was our RMS update. All right, so continue on, sir. This is fascinating to me and actually quite illuminating.
So quick recap, right? Cost, BYOB, which doesn't necessarily mean all those devices are going to be Android or iOS. They're probably going to be some combination of both. and familiarity to IT, which is probably the most important thing on this list, right? So if you can't get through to the IT manager, or even worse, if there's just one IT guy, you can't make the sale. And I'm sure Chris would tell you the same thing. Right?
I agree 100%. Yeah.
Like if you can't sell the guy in the technology you're using, even if you do manage to make the sale, he's just going to create roadblocks.
I definitely, during my career, I think it's really interesting as somebody who does the Linux Action Show too, is I witnessed the arc of I lost the deal because I wanted to use Linux, and then I would have to sort of like learn to like sort of pivot on my feet and be like, oh yeah, we could do it on Windows. And then like that arc finally concluded when I was leaving sort of the consulting gig as you win by selling it on Linux. Yeah, that runs on Linux. Yep, it'll run. Yep, we can do that on Linux. Yeah, oh yeah, that'll be no problem. Like, so it was a very fascinating thing because for a long time there was this sort of visceral bad reaction, especially in the area I was working at because it was at that time in the education sector and there was a lot of money coming in from Microsoft. Sure. So there was like an extra little bit of preference towards Microsoft. And then as I kind of expanded out from there, I witnessed sort of the general shift in perception from IT departments to more and more over time started asking for Linux. You know, can you do that with Samba? You know, those kinds of things. That was really fascinating to me to watch because then all of a sudden it became a market advantage to be able to say yes to that. Whereas when I started in my career, it was a market disadvantage.
You know, it's funny. I actually recently lost a sale because I wouldn't do something in Swift.
Swift?
Because I'm afraid to ship Swift to a customer because it's not a 1.0 language, and you know the syntax can change.
Now, how does that even is that even a thing yet?
Apple has managed to advertise Swift to non-developers to the point where super like middle management. I'm the random finance official from this company who's been designated the project manager for their company. It's like, oh, but we need Swift.
Someone who considers them like I'm an iPhone enthusiast.
Well, it's funny. Apple has managed to somehow create this sense to non-technical folks that by your app being written in Swift, it will somehow be better.
Wow, that is
even though Swift is not finalized as a language in terms of syntax or APIs or anything.
You know what that is, right? That is the strength and currency of brand that Apple has.
It's horrifying. Like
that's amazing, and it sort of just switches off the critical thinking area of people's brains.
Yeah, we ended up not being able to close the sale because, I'm sitting there. I'm saying, well, we could do it in Swift, but what if Apple changes the syntax or something crazy midstream in this project?
Let me tell you about my friend C#, and they said no thanks.
Well, we were actually saying, let me tell you about my friend Objective-C. It was fine for 20 years. My grandpa could have done this in Objective-C, kind of like. But it's just funny how, for these middle management pseudo-technical types, if they get a name in their head that they recognize as good, regardless of if their argument is based on reality, you have to sell into it, or you just can't sell.
So, do you think that C# has as much negative baggage associated with it as it has positive baggage, or do you think it's all pretty much like when you come in there and saying you're dropping things like the C# bomb and Xamarin and iOS and Android in the same sentence, are people like receptive to that, or are they like, I know Xcode, I know about Objective-C. What's the reaction?
So outside of our little nerd bubble, there's a couple important things. No one knows who Miguel de Icaza is or what Mono was.
Right.
So there's no baggage.
Yeah.
Everybody knows, and more importantly, every IT manager will sign off on C#.
Right.
And that's what
that's the Microsoft brand right there.
Right, and it's unfortunate.
I don't know. In business, I mean, Microsoft has a really strong brand for kind of steady as it goes for business.
Well, I think it's unfortunate because in a lot of ways, the C# systems or the .NET systems these companies are deploying or have previously deployed, Xamarin is a lot more modern than them, right? So there's still a little bit of a disconnect there.
Okay.
Because, you're running your 2003 Microsoft Server application.
Yeah.
You're still behind the ball, right? You're still not exactly where you want it to be.
Yeah, for sure.
I was very apprehensive about even getting involved with Xamarin at all, just because a lot of our customers are historically the people, striving to be on TechCrunch or the well-funded incubators, right?
Mm.
And Microsoft is a dirty word over there.
Mm-hmm.
So is C#. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge package. But anyway, it is not the be-all and end-all, but it is another tool in the belt. And I think, Chris, I should tell you how it's being used.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
So the shtick with Xamarin is not the Java write once, run everywhere thing, first off. So get it out of your head. And we're talking about vanilla Xamarin, right? We're not talking about Xamarin Forms just yet.
So it is not write once, run everywhere.
No. If you read my review, I talk a lot about the tooling. Long story short, the tooling on Mac, Xamarin Studio is phenomenal. Visual Studio integration is great, but extremely expensive.
Right.
And the Xamarin Studio on Windows is a piece of shit. And it's very clear that they assume that if you're on Windows, you can afford the Visual Studio license.
All right, well, PT Dave's here. He's waiting for us to get to his email. He wrote in to give us an update on how the training's going. He says, teaching thus far. He says, hey, guys, I thought I'd check in and let you know how things are going with the teaching program and how it's been going so far. It's been amazing when it comes to my programming classes. I feel I've already achieved a larger understanding with my students than any of my previous teachers ever had done. I have been going with a model of handing assignments out, of improving a previous assignment to do something more effectively or in an alternative way. While it makes the assignment short and simple, I feel it lets them understand things in a better way. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Even little brain teasers of how to find prime has worked really well. If for nothing else, doing this has helped me decide that I never want to do computer repair again. So that's my new ultimate goal. Also, the comments on Xamarin were very greatly appreciated and helped me stop me from purchasing a license from them. PT Dave. So what do you think of this? So he's having them create something, and then for the next assignment, he's kind of having them iterate on it and improve it a little bit. That's a great idea, huh?
Yeah, that's how software development works. I just want to fast forward a little bit. So the comment about Xamarin helped you out there, huh? By the way, it is Xamarin, not Xamarin.
Xamarin, whatever.
See, it's your blatant disrespect for the .NET community, who hates the .NET community? There you go.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I think it's wasted effort.
All right, let's take a little moment and spend some time together again. Back here in the present, I want to tell you about something that's great, something you know about, something if you don't know about, you got to get all up in there. That's DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com right now. If you don't know about DigitalOcean, well, then you're missing out on kind of Mike's secret sauce for what he does for the back end of his clients, and lately what Jupiter Broadcasting has been doing to expand our infrastructure on demand without any delay or any major cost. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to spin up your own cloud server. You're going to get root access to this bad mamma jamma. You're going to be crazy impressed with the speed. You're never even going to have it. You're just going to be blown. Your mind's going to be, if you've never experienced anything like this, you're literally going to have your mind blown. It's so awesome. And the great thing is you can go try this out for free for a couple of months. I'm going to tell you how to do that in a second. But first, check out DigitalOcean. You can get started in less than a minute. Pricing starts at $5 a month. That's like less than a burger, right? It's $5 a month for 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, all SSDs throughout the whole DigitalOcean infrastructure, one CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. And the interface that DigitalOcean has put on this, it's so nice because it's just so simple. It's so straightforward. You can just get started. You can go create something. You're not going to spend a lot of time monkeying around. It's not esoteric like a lot of virtual machine interfaces are. If you've ever worked with any enterprise-grade virtualization stuff, all of the interfaces are always really crazy and esoteric. DigitalOcean realized what they had to do is start with incredible performant hardware. Then they utilized Linux and the KVM virtualizer because it's honestly one of the best in the business. And then they said there's still that key piece. We got the best bandwidth. We got the best software. We got the best rigs. We've got to have the best interface. That's the DigitalOcean control panel. Super powerful and intuitive. And power users can replicate the functionality on a larger scale with DigitalOcean's crazy great API. A crazy great API that the community is already taking tons of advantage of. So you can jump in today and start using it, or like a ton of great apps, or you can build something for your own infrastructure around it. Not only that, but DigitalOcean also has an incredible log and category of tutorials. So you can deploy software on a DigitalOcean droplet in most cases using a one-click deployment method. It's 2015. It's like, yes, finally. If you ever got to a point, though, where you're going to do something that's not one click, and that can happen, obviously. Maybe you're going to set up like a Minecraft server or something like that. They've got a ton of amazing tutorials for lots of distributions, all of the Red Hat-based ones, Ubuntu-based ones, but also now FreeBSD. And there's also CoreOS available up on DigitalOcean. CoreOS, I think, could be one of the biggest game changers in the enterprise server market for the base OS, the way they do the containerization but keep the base system rolling so that way it's always being patched against things like shell shock and heartbleed, which is absolutely critical, but yet doesn't impact the isolated containerized application environments. I mean, it's obvious, right? It's also what Ubuntu's doing now, but you can get your hands on it and deploy it in production over at DigitalOcean. And DigitalOcean works with the CoreOS project in hand to make sure that they're part of the official update channel so that when CoreOS, the upstream distribution, they have a direct channel to push those updates down to DigitalOcean, and the DigitalOcean can disseminate them across the droplets. They worked hand in hand with the project to make it happen. It's incredible. They also did a fantastic write-up about the technical differences and challenges of bringing FreeBSD to their platform. A very fascinating read. Head over to DigitalOcean. Now, here's the best part. I've saved it to the end. I don't want you to forget this part. Use our promo code CODERDIGITAL. Then you can try out the $5 rig for 2 months for free because they're going to give you a $10 credit. Go play with that performance. Go try out CoreOS. Go see how exhilarating it is to just update the packages on your system on a droplet up at DigitalOcean. I'm not even kidding. That alone is thrilling. Go try it out 2 months for free, Coder Digital, then go build yourself something awesome. Go deploy Ghost, GitLab. Go try anything. BitTorrent Sync, OwnCloud, Minecraft, Mumble. It's your own server. We're going to tell you a lot more in an upcoming Linux Action Show about how we are using DigitalOcean droplets to power the most high-fidelity, most performant remote video solution I've ever seen. And it's totally all built on top of open-source software powered by Linux using DigitalOcean servers for the back-end infrastructure. And I wouldn't go anywhere else. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code CODERDIGITAL when you check out. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Coder Digital, guys, thank you very much for supporting our sponsors too. Keeps us on the air. Now, as we move on, we'll be back soon. You know what's going to be crazy, and I'm just going to say this right now, is I have no idea what's going to happen next week. So essentially what kind of happened is we were going to do a retrospective because we've had these topics we wanted to sort of replay, reanalyze, and Rikai is going back to see family. Rikai is the editor of the Coder Radio, all of the shows, and the Coder Radio program is one of them. And I haven't edited since he's come on board. I just haven't done it. I used to edit all the shows. You know, I would host and edit. I would do the prep, host and edit. And then I realized that I'd rather put a gun in my mouth. So I decided, okay, I should probably hand off the editing. That was a good signal that maybe I was getting overworked. And so now that he's leaving for a week, I thought, well, I could A, have an anxiety attack. B, maybe we could make some best of episodes so that way I would have a much lighter editing load. And so we'd already kind of been working on this. So as it happened to be, we were kind of ready to go and had done the groundwork for this retrospective episode. So when Mike got stuck in some work today and said he couldn't make it, I was like, well, I mean, we've got this. But here's the flip side. That means next week when we have a Coder Radio, it's all on me. I got to edit that stuff. I don't even know if I remember what the Final Cut icon looks like, let alone how I upload it and put it on the CDN. So who knows? 142. Well, at least it's 42. That gives me hope. So why don't we enjoy the remainder of this episode and while we at least have this time together.
So looking for folks in New Jersey who love Unix.
Have to be in New Jersey? They can't work remote? Okay.
Have to be in New Jersey. We did remote, didn't work out.
Okay.
And this is the conversation I want to have. Less for me to plug hiring, but plug. Go follow us on Facebook. More about, it's funny because now that I'm on the other side for a good portion of the time, remote really doesn't work when it doesn't work. And I know that's a stupid platitude, but wow.
Well, we came down pretty hard on Yahoo's decision when Marissa Meyer pulled the plug on remote working. I mean, we were pretty critical.
It's just amazing how much you lose by being remote. Even little things like, I mean, we still have remote people. The lovely Zane Swafford, and he's just fine. But we've had other folks that it just doesn't work out. And I think it's funny, given all the tools we have. We used to use HipChat. Now we're using a program called Slack for remote communications. Big GitHub users. Chris, my GitHub cost is now $100 a month.
Ouch! Enjoy GitHub.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Yes. But still, not having that right there water cooler interaction has a cost. And I don't know, am I becoming an old curmudgeon?
No, I agree with you. Actually, I don't think you're a curmudgeon at all. I think, and unfortunately, I've noticed this on the opposite end because I've been the remote guy a lot, working with clients, and for clients that were important, I would have to set up on-site meetings, and if I was really important, it'd be weekly. And if it wasn't weekly, it would be as frequently as schedule would allow. And the clients that I didn't really super get too worried if I lost, I wouldn't bother towards the end. And that, to me, was the biggest indicator that, being on site really matters. Hi there. It teaches people how to interpret the way you write. They can hear your voice better in an email when they even, because when you're on a phone, you're in phone mode, but when you're with somebody, you learn their tones, you learn the way they speak. And so when you read something in an email, sometimes if you don't work with that person day on and day out, in person, you can sometimes misinterpret the tone, which can then just sort of, it seems like such a small thing, but it can breed dissatisfaction on both sides, distrust on both sides, frustration on both sides. And that is just one element. Then there's the quick passing, hey, what about, maybe you could do, did you think about, hey, can we, those kinds of things that just don't come up when a person isn't walking past you, right?
Yes.
I've noticed this just working with Rikai, when I'm there, there's a lot of things we'll discuss that come up, and when I'm working remote, it's really kind of minimal. Okay, we'll just check in on certain specific things that we both are aware that we need to check in on to keep the ball rolling. But there's not so much of a collaboration process, and for some job descriptions, that's fine. What you're working on is you get your chunk, you work on that for a while, and what you need to do is produce results. But for other types of job roles, it needs to be a little bit more of a back and forth. And it doesn't matter if you leave a Hangout running 24/7 or a Skype call or whatever it is not the same thing. I hate to say it, but it's been my experience as well. And the reason why I hate to say it is because I'd all love to believe that one day we could all be sitting in our houses hooked up to fiber internet with Oculus Rifts on our head and go to work and never have to leave the house. That's my future.
So I think there's still a place for remote work. I just think we have to have the assumption that there's an inherent value loss in being remote. Unless if you're part of a team, unless you're black boxing some functionality or some entire project. Now I could be wrong. I could be a curmudgeon, but it's funny because it just doesn't seem to. It just doesn't seem to work.
Okay, so let's explore this. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. If somebody, so you say it works for some job types, do you think in some cases then that should be factored into the pay? If you working remote comes with I don't even know how you could quantify it, but let's say a 30% productivity cost or collaboration cost or whatever you wanted to title it, does that get factored into the wage they should be asking for or get paid?
I don't know. I mean, I know that's kind of what I suggested, but the way we've ended up resolving this is just by not doing it anymore. We have Zane, and Zane's wonderful, so he's the exception. Beyond that, it's I think we tried it with 5 people and it worked out with 1.
My experience has been for me, I've had a lot of people offer to help out, but the thing is the type of work we do involves these massive files, and it's part art and part editing. There is sort of a feel to how things should be edited, and it's very, very hard to have somebody remote. I mean, that's why we flew Rikai literally across the United States. That is, he came from Maine, and now he's moved to Washington, so that way he could be our editor, because it really is something where we've experimented with remote editing, we've experimented with a lot of remote stuff. There's some things we have producers for the Linux Action Show and Linux Unplugged, and they're remote because they're doing guest lineup. They're doing show preparation. They're doing the organization of a lot of the operational details of producing those two shows, and they don't have to be on site. And sometimes our collaboration does suffer, especially when I'm really busy and I don't have time to jump in the mumble room and have a conversation for an hour. But we try to stay in touch over IRC. What tools have you guys used to collaborate with your remote users? Have you guys tried like a persistent chat room and things like that?
Yeah, so we have one. We used to use Atlassian's HipChat. Now we're using one called Slack. That's been a pretty good solution.
Yeah, we just use IRC. I mean, just good old classic IRC, and it seems to work pretty well because we, the bulk of us, not all of us, but the bulk of us have always persistent IRC connections. So somebody can drop a message in that IRC room, in a specific production room, and I could come back 4 hours, 5 hours later, and I'll see it. I'm not necessarily there all the time. But then you do need more immediate messaging, right? So then we're using Viber for the more immediate stuff.
Right.
Which is great because like when we're gonna go on location to Linux Fest Northwest, and their IRC isn't gonna be the best option because we're gonna be moving around. It's gonna be Viber. So it depends on the tools. So tools help, and things like Basecamp help too. Have you ever tried that?
We had, yeah. We actually got rid of it. So we've gone pretty all in on GitHub. That has not. So GitHub is very unfriendly to our type of business in terms of the cost scheme.
Yeah.
We tend to have a lot of small repos rather than a lot of, I don't even know you would say, one big product repo.
Yeah, I follow you.
So it's a little weird. Certainly at this point I think we're paying $100 a month just for GitHub.
Yeah, that's,
It's tough to consider that reasonable.
Yeah, I'm paying a pretty penny to Google Apps these days. Imagine how I feel. I'm not very happy about that either.
Yeah, it's funny, but GitHub's giving us the bug tracking and all of that stuff in one place. Do I think we're going to be on GitHub forever? Probably not, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
$100. In fact, we probably wouldn't have tolerated it for this long if we weren't currently actively working on a long-term project. Or where are we going to go? We're going to go back to Bitbucket? Maybe, but the problem with Bitbucket was the issue tracker was never up to snuff.
So are you considering rolling your own GitHub server? Are you considering changing, or are you just thinking you're going to bite it down? And
I don't want to roll my own. I think that's incredibly dangerous. I think what would end up happening is we'd end up going with Bitbucket and then using an external issue tracker.
Okay. And the problem is anytime you make big changes like that, there's a loss in productivity. And when you have and in coordinating those types of, this is another example where remote workers can be difficult, because coordinating sort of big platform changes like that with your remote workers, like eventually, if you're a small operation, something falls through the cracks, somebody forgets to tell somebody something, and the remote worker gets a surprise one morning or something like that when they need to look something up or do something, and that causes friction as well. And it's very challenging. I feel like these are challenges, and I know maybe for your situation, for the particular job, it's not applicable, but for some jobs, these challenges are worth fighting through because there are so many talented people all over the world that the internet connects us to that it's a shame not to be able to take advantage of people who want to contribute,
I would say that's fair. The other thing I would add, though, is in our case, when you're a very, very small company, there's also a value in having people around just for, having people around.
Yeah, yeah.
For Yahoo or Microsoft, it's a little different, right? Because there's still going to be 5,000 people in Redmond. I mean,
yeah.
In fact, that's a gross underestimate.
All right, well, let's talk about, speaking of crazy names, let's talk about Flappy Bird. Just this whole thing kind of felt like it's just blown up since our last show. Like, out of nowhere, Flappy Bird becomes a thing, and it sounds like the guy might have goosed his ratings early on, and then that kicked off like this whole discovery, and then it just built on top of that.
So there's some suggestion that he paid one of these services to boost his rating, which
like late last year.
which I've never done, but is extremely common.
Yeah. And then that kind of broke him into like a threshold of a certain amount a day, which then made him show up on some charts, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And people probably are familiar with Flappy Bird at this point. It's like this impossible to beat game.
I haven't played it, to be honest with you.
I haven't either, because it looks like a bad time.
Yeah, it looks really crappy to me.
Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna really hate myself if I.
To me, this entire story is less about the game and more about, wow, if you make the top of the charts, you can have a pretty crappy thing and do well.
Well, let me ask you this. So, do you think this is gonna kick off a whole new generation of tap type games that just are total crap games that people are gonna charge?
I think him pulling it. I mean, I'm sure there's someone right now trying to find a dev to clone it.
Well, in the Play Store, there's tons of clones, tons and tons of clones in the Play Store.
Yeah, because the problem is, this game doesn't look terribly hard to develop, right? I mean, you could do.
No, he said he did it in a day. He said he did it in a day. So my question though to you is, what do you think about this whole he's pulled it thing because of the response? Is this a marketing gimmick? So he's pulled it out of the app stores now. He took it down from iOS and Android, and said that he just couldn't take all of the hate, even though the game was generating $50,000 a day in ad revenue.
Yeah, I would take the hate.
$50,000 a day in ad revenue. You can believe that? $50,000? What? That's according to a report on The Verge, which is blowing my mind right now. For a crappy game, it took him a day. A crappy game, it took him a day, dude.
It's a lot of money.
47,000 reviews in the App Store. It's been downloaded 50 million times.
It's a weird situation.
The other story here that I think is interesting is, you know how there's been this meta discussion about games that prompt you to rate them, and it's really annoying and interrupts you?
Yeah, did you see what EA did? Which is amazing.
No.
So on their new Dungeon Keeper game, they put up the rating dialogue. How would you rate this game? 1 to 4 stars, 5 stars. If you tap 1 to 4, it just brings you to like nothing, like a little in-app feedback thing. If you tap 5, it pushes you back to the App Store.
Funny. Well, so what this guy did, and I think this is part of his success, is on the start screen, you've got start, score, and rate. So he's not obnoxious about the rating. It's just a little button on the first screen. And I think it might even suggest like some crazy stuff that you put in there. I don't know. Like some... this game's horrible. I hate it so much. 5 stars. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by something that, even if it was manipulated a little bit at the beginning, like it catches fire like this, the guy makes a ton of money, and then to see somebody pull it, this whole thing is really, it's been fascinating to watch, and it's only really possible with this App Store economy that we have now, this App Store marketplace, where something can just blow up like this all over the world, and we can all link to it, and we all download it, and then it can just be pulled immediately. So like if you didn't get Flappy Bird, you're not getting Flappy Bird. And there's nothing you could do about it because these new app stores, it's gone. I
have a feeling that he pulled it. I mean, I kind of feel bad for the guy, to be honest.
I think it's a marketing ploy.
I don't. I could see a lot of people being super nasty.
Yeah. No, I've seen some of the tweets. Yeah,
especially since it came out that he gamed the system in the beginning, which is something that all large companies in the app space certainly do.
Yeah.
But the problem is large companies, even if you work for them, well, someone in marketing did that. It's not my fault. When it's a personal dude, it's, having said that, I don't know. I mean, to me, the story here is that it's a non-story, right? It just proves that gaming the App Store still works as long as your app is free.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's kind of what I wanted to get the bottom of is now, neither one of us have played it, so maybe we're not in a good position to talk about this, but it seems like at a certain point, you don't reach that volume. I mean, maybe that initial goosing, but then it seems to have legitimately had an actual viral spreading. Like, people
the issue has always been, once you hit one of the top charts, you're golden no matter what. That's why getting featured by Apple is always something that is really helpful because it puts you on that front page.
Yeah, I guess that you think that's all it took is just you got there and then one thing led to another. But would people really be sharing and rating as much? I mean, you saw 47,000 reviews or something like that. I mean, would they be compelled to give it that many ratings and reviews if they didn't enjoy it in some way?
I'm not suggesting that nobody enjoyed it. I'm suggesting that if he didn't goose it, he wouldn't have done well.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I see what you're saying there, and you're right.
I mean, it's a lot of people try to say apps are bad, apps are good. to be honest, most apps are bad in some ways and good in others because they have limited budgets, right?
Yeah.
A lot of apps that are super highly designed, for instance, are a lot slower than they ought to be because that design takes resources.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of apps that look like dog shit tend to run really fast and really efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing to take away from this is not surprising. People are still dicks on the internet. So if you do anything publicly, you're going to get nasty feedback. And still proves that Apple made an attempt to stop this kind of gaming and it didn't work.
Couldn't they have done more in both the paper case and in this? Like, seems like
so. Apple probably shouldn't do more in the paper case, right?
I don't know. I mean, wouldn't the fix just be you the first come first serve? You get in there, you register your name, and once you've registered that name, nobody else can register the same name.
So you can do an app where on your iPhone it shows up as, let's say we call the app Dog is what it looks like on your iPhone, but I could actually call that for the App Store Dog by Fingertip Tech.
Okay.
So what happens is the display name and the actual name.
So there is actually a rule like that. I see, but you can just get around it.
You can just change it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, all right, very good. Yeah, so Peacemaker in the chat room says that game was totally viral. My Facebook feed was filled with screenshots. You know, I did see a lot of screenshots on Google Plus too. A lot of people talking about it. That's actually how I heard about it first, was on Google Plus. And then,
yeah, I mean, this guy, he certainly deserves the success more than Candy Crush does, right?
All right, Mr. Dominic, why don't we shift gears and talk about Build? It just wrapped up last week, a Build 2014. Microsoft made some big announcements. They said they're open sourcing their .NET compiler and their whole platform, Roslyn, right? This is huge, right?
I don't even know what this means. I put on Twitter last night that I thought it was a big deal. Some folks have questioned, well, why does it matter? I think this is huge, right? I mean, one of the biggest complaints out of Xamarin has been, since Microsoft only selectively open sourced .NET before,
right.
They had to kind of guess. I mean, at the minimum, this is going to be huge for Xamarin developers. At the minimum.
I think this is a really big deal. Now, I think most of it's under an Apache license.
It's very permissive.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are saying this is a response in, trying to stay relevant while they still can. I really like Mary Jo Foley's take on this. Mary Jo Foley wrote, over on ZDNet. She wrote a piece after she talked with some guys behind the scenes, and she's always really good at kind of getting the root of the Microsoft story. She's one of my favorite Microsoft followers, and I think one of the things, Mike, that has been talked a lot about with some of these most recent announcements, and I'm including like Office for the iPad and now the open sourcing of a lot of the .NET platform. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's Satya Nadella. And in fact, over the weekend, I wrote a piece from Business Week that said, in 5 days, Satya Nadella has turned Microsoft around and transformed the company. And that was the headline. And implying that he got it, Ballmer stepped out and Satya sat down and went, know what I'm going to do? Office for the iPad. Know what else I'm going to do? Open source .NET. And just snapped his fingers. Come on.
Ballmer gets a bad rap, right? Ballmer... It's silly to think. Now, it's possible that they held the iPad versions of Office and they held open sourcing this, A, for build, and B, to give the new CEO something to show, because for the media, that's a great narrative, right?
It's already building, yeah.
Yeah, and it helps them build this story of a pivot.
Mike, if that is true, it would be one of the most brilliant maneuvers we have seen out of Microsoft in the last 5 years.
It's pretty obvious it is true, right? Those iPad apps had to take a very long time to develop, I can tell you as an iOS developer. The quality and the feature richness, that certainly wasn't done in 5 days.
No, of course not. In fact, so Mary Jo was talking to Soma Smozengir. Oh, boy, that's awful. He's the corporate vice president of Microsoft's developer division, so he's the guy that would know. He told Mary Jo at Build last week that they have been working around open sourcing more of .NET for the last 3 years. They've been working on this. In fact, the Xamarin guys have been flying out there, partnering with Microsoft, and they were a key advisor in all of this. Now, which is interesting because some inside Microsoft were initially quite leery of Xamarin's goal to help the .NET developers write apps that worked on Android and iOS because they felt like those platforms were competing with Windows. But over time, more and more people inside Microsoft saw Xamarin more as friend than foe, and they started listening to these guys. And so they started saying, okay, well, if we're going to open source these, how do we need to do it? How do we engage with the community? And according to what Mary Jo got, this has been 3 years in the work, and Xamarin in the last few months has been really coming in and kind of closing up the deal, which might be why we've seen a lot of these acquisition rumors floating around.
Yeah. I don't know what to think. I mean, the legal implications of them opening the source of this took more than, 2 months, right?
For sure.
The idea that this is all Satya coming in and being like, I'm changing everything.
Superman!
Yeah, it's just not true, right?
No.
I mean, we're not going to see what his policies are for at least another 3
This is the litmus test for actual journalists versus the armchair journalists. Like when you see him writing these Satya's change the company in 5 days headlines, add that one to your armchair journalist list.
You know what he's probably changed? He's probably changed his office, I'm sure, quite a bit. And he's probably maybe changed a few cultural things.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the recent Azure price adjustments weren't, coming from his office.
Well, but he was also the head of Azure.
Exactly.
So certainly, and maybe changing the name from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure.
I could see that too.
But even that, because again, they've had so many problems with names.
Yeah.
There had to be some sort of legal review.
Right. Yeah.
I don't.
Well, the chat room thinks this is Microsoft taking on Java. The chat room says that with them open sourcing C#, it's a full-on shot at Java, and some people in the chat room are speculating that this is going to eventually this is going to leave Java in the dust.
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, I'm a fairly notorious Java fan, and I would say that there are a number of things in C# that are frankly better. The idea that someone else would take C# other than Xamarin and do an implementation that could compete with Java is... I'm trying to think of who would want to do it. Unless Xamarin decided to get into the whole full stack and offer like a web services and ASP.NET equivalent, which is also open source, so I guess they could at this point.
Yeah.
But the mono runtime has never been great.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty big deal, and it's part of an overall... I think what they're trying to do is... I think Microsoft is actually fully come to terms with, all right, we de-emphasize the individual platforms, we emphasize the infrastructure, the back-end services, and .NET plays into that. They created the .NET Foundation as part of all of this to foster open development and collaboration with the community. That seems like a really big deal. This is a serious commitment on their part. It's maybe not my favorite license in the world, but it's a real license that people can use. It's not some made-up thing.
So it's interesting, because I released my open source under Apache 2. What's your issue with Apache 2?
I probably, I'm not a big licenses person to begin with. Here, I usually fall into the camp of stuff. Either is usually BSD licensed, which is close to Apache, or GPL.
That's pretty similar.
Yeah, or GPL. And it just depends on what it is and what license is best for it. So I
think that makes sense. I mean, if you look at it, and from my perspective, I'm usually open sourcing little toolkits, little utility kits that I've used that I use in sometimes CodeJournal or other internal projects. Or stuff I just do on the weekends to use in client projects later.
I've watched GPL. So I had an old friend who had a really great product for schools that was GPL. He had somebody come along and take it up, and they did some really cool work with it and really impressed upon it. But they built 20% of their solution on top of his whole stack, and they kind of put him out of business, but because of the GPL, he was able to get that code back, make his project and product better, and he was able to sort of have a rebound, and also then built out his own new niche. He sort of pivoted and created a new niche using some of their improvements, and I watched him go on this yo-yo cycle of like, oh man, I'm devastated. They just took my own code and just put me out of business. Oh wait, I'm benefiting from them modifying my code. Now I have a new market opportunity, and he sort of came back. Like it was like a comeback scenario, and I thought, wow, it sort of saved him that he got that code back when he put it out there like that. And so I can see, there's good uses for all different types of licenses. And I think that the fact that it's not some sort of Microsoft shared code license.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a non-starter.
Right.
For me.
Yeah, exactly. That's the deal breaker, and it's not that. It's a serious commitment, and that's what I get from it.
Okay, so Apple announced Swift, and this is quickly when Mike's mood turned pretty sour. The audience seemed to respond extremely positive in the keynote. I would say this was the point in the keynote that got the biggest applause. And I don't think they really said Objective-C is dead. In fact, they said Swift and Objective-C can live together, essentially. So where do you want to start with this, Mike?
There are a lot of things I don't like about this. Oh, God. I don't even know where to go with it first.
Well,
all right, so they're not saying Objective-C is dead, right?
Right.
No one said Carbon was dead either when they announced Cocoa. This is kind of the pattern they like to go with, right? So certainly Objective-C isn't dead, but its days are definitely numbered. And additionally, Swift is definitely designed to be a more developer-friendly language, which is awesome if you're thinking of getting into iOS. Not so great if you've already been there for a while, right?
Yeah, you're worried because it lowers the bar for entry, so somebody can just sort of be in high school and make an app. I mean, isn't that the case now? They talked about developers there that were as young as 13 years of age. I think this barrier to entry is already really low.
It's low, but see, the current Objective-C toolkit doesn't give you a lot of the things that a lot of developers have gotten used to on other platforms. So maybe, I understand it's kind of a curmudgeon argument to be making, but one of the nice things about being on the Objective-C side of life is that it's just so annoying to work with that a lot of developers don't want to. And the market is still pretty thin. This Swift stuff, I think, is going to be super easy for anybody to pick up.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the point. And I guess you could see a dilution of the market. I would suspect for a little while Swift will be so new that there just isn't going to be a one-to-one replacement. I mean, I could be wrong, but I would expect you'll find a lot of folks, well, yeah, I tried Swift, but I ended up just using it to sort of glue these two pieces together, and then I put a little Objective-C in there to finish it up. Or,
Yeah.
I don't think this means Objective-C is gone. I don't think this means Objective-C is dead even for years.
I think what you're going to see is a lot of new developers go directly to Swift within the next year or two, and a lot of older developers stick with Objective-C, but eventually Swift will continue to become more common, right?
I do believe I mean, I think Objective-C is on a death watch now. I think we should start the clock. We could even start a pool and take bets when they're going to pull the plug on Objective-C, when it's going to come up out of the ground in a tombstone, like iOS 9 did. Or OS 9, I mean.
Yes, I like Shane Kufel in the chat. My tooling got better when. Yes, but Shane, I want my tooling to be crappy. I was also upset when they released Arc. So.
That is kind of your argument, though.
No, that is exactly my argument. I was angry when they released automatic reference counting too, because it was a simple supply and demand calculation, right?
But on the flip side, they say that their language will help a lot of common coding mistakes that lead to errors. That could be a really beneficial thing. Right.
Again, though, how many projects do I get that other people have blown up because they make memory mistakes in Objective-C? So it's kind of a double-edged thing. But let me put it to you this way. Your Swift is beneficial to you in a converse relationship with how experienced you are with Objective-C, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially with old Objective-C. So the further back you went, the more of an advantage all those hurdles Objective-C put on developers were to you. Because once you learn it, you learn it.
And I just think because Swift is theoretically going to be simpler to use, and they demonstrated on stage, we'll have to wait and see real world results, but they demonstrated a massive speed improvement.
Yes.
It will eventually, just in pure adoption rate, just smash Objective-C. And I understand what you're saying, but I still think it takes more than just how hard it is to use a language to make a good app and make a good developer and make revenue.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm thinking less for developing first-party software and more for
client services,
low-end customer projects, right? Low-end client.
Come in and fix this. This guy botched this all up, and now this new language might prevent some of those things that have them calling you in the first place.
Right. I mean, when Arc became mainstream, we saw a lot less of those. My app randomly crashes, and I fired the other dev team because most of those random crashes were memory management issues. So there's an effect. Now, having said that, Swift may allow
Swift may allow some new opportunities, but they haven't shown me anything new with Swift. They just showed me this is stuff you could have done in Objective-C.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier in Swift, and that's a little scary for me.
All right, well, let me switch gears to Johnny. He wrote in, and he titled his email Software Factory, so I'm already curious. He says, hello, thanks to your shows, especially last, my wife and I switched to Linux a few years ago, Mint on Dell Inspirons and Dell XPSs. So far, a great experience, and it connected me to my old times when I used to be a geek. I think you might still be. All right, at present, I'm a project manager at one of the largest IT companies in South America. Yes, I've moved into the dark side, and I would like to hear from you guys any comments on the software factory paradigm. Is it viable, or is it just a dream/nightmare? Salutations from Chile. Sorry for my English, Johnny. So, it's funny he said this because I said that Jupiter Broadcasting was a podcast factory in a sense, or we have a production pipeline, and things have to happen at a certain time, or else the next product gets sort of jammed up. I suppose this is very true for software too, and I think of a place like Angry Birds, like Rovio, or Zynga, where they have like these in-app purchase games where they have to constantly be producing new levels and new stuff for people to buy in-game, or like a lot of these sandbox games that are on tablets now. Simpsons Tapped Out is one of them. There's other ones out there. They just constantly require that the developers must be just continuously churning out code, almost like a factory.
Yeah, I mean, but there is also this idea of a software factory in that you would get the software development process to be so efficient that it could literally be like a factory line, right? Like an assembly line. I'm assuming he's not talking about the factory pattern, which is a development pattern. That's almost certainly not what he's talking about. I don't think that's a realistic goal, and I know I'm being a negative Nancy today. And the reason I'll say that is, at least in projects I usually work on, it worked for Ford Motor Company because every car they build is exactly the same. Right? They have a set specification and they're building it. In fact, we're at Fingertip, we're becoming more agile, which makes me want to vomit in my mouth. But we're doing it because it's a necessary evil, and it's certainly less of a control freaks dev model, and it's a little more freewheeling. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, most of the time you get a project, the person either doesn't know what they want or actually doesn't want what they told you they want. And this idea that you're going to somehow get such a good process that's going to make it like a mechanical factory is to me a dream, right?
You'd really literally have to be almost producing the same thing over and over again. Like, MMOs are another good example where they just take kind of the same stuff and they switch stuff around, switch the story around, change out the assets. So there are probably some gigs where you could get close, right? But even then, technologies improve. The capability of computers improve, and so it seems almost like by the time you got a factory line set up, some kind of change, either in the requirement of the software or the technology itself, would change. So it does seem like a dream that's almost impossible.
So certainly some of the factory guys, and I'm not an expert on this.
I would love to hear from if anybody out there sort of works in a software factory. That would be really interesting.
I mean, the idea that there is, value to be gained and efficiency to be gained by learning on what didn't work before, I think is just common sense. And I'm not sure that needs to be its own ideology, right? I would love to talk to someone who has successfully implemented this to the point where it is truly like a physical assembly line, truly that well. I get the feeling that it's kind of like agile, where it's not a Boolean, right? You're not agile or waterfall. You're somewhere in between. It's like a spectrum, right?
Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Thank you, TLC.
Yeah, okay, good.
I'll stick to the rivers and the streams.
They're fools.
And there you have it. That brings us to the end of this week's retrospective on the Coda Radio program. Now, assuming I managed to find the Final Cut icon, somehow figure out how to run the encoding scripts, and publish the file up on the CDN, well, then you'll have an episode. But your best chance, join us live, because we're going to do that. That I know how to do. Go over to jblive.tv, nope, don't listen to me. It's noon on a Monday. That's 3 p.m. Pacific. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Get it converted to your local time. And then you don't got to worry about it. Show up live, because I know you're going to get that next week. I don't know about the rest of that, but I know you're going to get that. So be here for that next week, and then hopefully on the download shortly after that. Thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of Coder Radio. Love to get your feedback over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact, and not to forget that subreddit, coderradio.reddit.com. See you right back here next week.